The content provided in this video is for educational purposes only and is not medical advice. For medical advice, please schedule an appointment with one of our Hope for Healing providers or the appropriate medical professional. This material is the property of Hope for Healing and is not to be shared or replicated in any way without written consent. Thank you.
Okay, so some of the questions we have this month are super wonderful in regards to like mental health. And because this is Mental Health Awareness Month as well as Disease Awareness Month, we're going to make sure some of those questions get answered first. So thank you so much for joining us, Dr. K. As always, it is super wonderful to be able to talk with you, for you to be able to just share with us what it seems to be super exciting, which we're going to be doing next month, is really Dr. K sharing her story, because so many questions have come in that are really revolved around your story. And I feel like it's after Abigail shared that her life wasn't always like functional medicine, that she has really been able to grow into this. And you've really been able to just have a humble, like, beginning and transition to really be able to walk alongside our patients from a very, very similar standpoint. So we're really excited to be able to talk to you about that next month. So for those of you who are asking those questions, if we don't get to those questions, know that next month is really just a deep dive. We've met so many of our providers, we've met amazing coaches, but really to get to meet and understand what got Dr. K to where she is today, and just the way that she leads with authenticity. So question number one is, what do you do to help your mental health? You're busy, you have a full life. What do you do?
That's a really great question. It's so many things. I think the biggest needle mover to keep me happy and not sad, not crying, not depressed is eating clean. And by eating clean, I don't do well with gluten. I don't do well with dairy. I don't do too well with corn, and not a lot of sugar. I eat dark chocolate, and I have desserts here and there at some of our favorite clean eating places like True Food Kitchen, Bella Green, Hubble and Hudson. There's some choices, but a clean diet is really important, and not drinking alcohol or minimizing it. And if you do, having it, because alcohol is a depressant. And if you eat it with a meal, that's good. Plus, and then I think another thing is, for my mental health, I have to get good sleep. If I don't get good sleep, that's when we clean our brains out, when we sleep. It's called the glymphatic system. And it's kind of like the lymphatic system of our brain. So food and sleep. But my go-to, because precision genetics changed my life, my happy place is Mood Plus. It is a concoction of different vitamins, minerals, and herbs. And I take 2 in the morning, 2 in the evening. And I also provide my body with methylation support. That is like this regular flow of B vitamins that makes dopamine. Dopamine helps us focus and concentrate, and it helps us balance like the excitatory neurotransmitters and the non-excitatory ones, like the calming ones. So to get that balance, you have to have enough dopamine. And so, and I take some anti-inflammatories, PEA, I take that too. So my mental health, and then I really do try to just spend time with my family, completely detached from work or messages, and play and laugh. And something we're doing as a practice is to find joy. And so when things aren't so hot, if I can just take the time to find joy in the moment and not put it off. And I think that's a thing that a lot of moms do. They're so task oriented We're like, I got to get this done. I got to do this. I got to do this.
Right.
And it's like living in the present, living in the moment. So mental health, food, water,
Yeah.
adequate sleep, and then fueling my neurotransmitters based on my precision genetics. And that is really what helped me get well. So, and then I try to do functional therapies every once in a while, like I try to get IV ozone with some a Myers cocktail or some IV vitamin C, and it just gives me a boost and it makes me feel good. And it's just all these things. So yeah.
What I think I love most about what you're saying, though, is that there is so much that there's available to us in order to go from a anxious, depressive state to a positive state, that maybe one formula isn't, like one thing isn't going to do it, but that there's so many different aspects to try. It's like, okay, let's look at one of those things at a time to be able to really dive into that, which also gives us hope, right? Hope that,
Yes.
okay, this thing didn't do it only, but maybe I can add something else to it. This question kind of is tied into the genetics. So I think this is a really interesting place to dive into, is that what would be the top 5 supplements you would recommend looking at my genetics when someone is on a budget? And I know you can't really look at the specifics because this is with this patient, but when looking at broken genetics or broken SNPs, and which spot do you start with? Like, which pathway do you start with first?
That's an excellent question. I would start with the inflammation. And if I had to pick the best thing, it would be PEA support. Why? It lowers inflammation. Inflammation, we think of hot, red, swollen, and painful, but how's that show up? I've got a headache. I'm tired. My muscles ache. My hair's falling out. I get constipated, or I've got diarrhea. Well, PEA works for physical pain and mental pain, and it lowers inflammation in the gut and it lowers inflammation in the brain. So that would be, and if you're looking at your genetics and you look at inflammation, autophagy, detoxification, methylation, and mitochondria. So top 5, yeah, I don't know what your genetics are, and it depends what they look like. But if I had to pick one thing for inflammation, it would be PEA. Okay.
Right.
Just if I had to pick a supplement. If I had to pick one thing for autophagy, which is pulling sugar out of your bloodstream, putting it into your cells, and giving your cells fuel to clean the debris out. And when you can have stable blood sugar, your moods improve, everything improves, and your cells start cleaning themselves out. DCI for autophagy. And then for detoxification, if you need it, glutathione, go to the master. Everybody talks about N-acetylcysteine. It's great, but N-cysteine is one of the 3 sulfur-containing amino acids that slammed onto the glutathione molecule. It's the last one. It's kind of a rotten egg smell. I'd say go to glutathione. It's the master detoxifier, master anti-inflammatory, but it helps heal the gut and move things through. And then for methylation,
Can
depending
you go
on
quickly into what methylation is before we, because
yeah,
that is just it's a
yeah,
really big concept, but what is
yeah.
breaking it down?
Simply, it's the ability to deliver vitamin B9. That's folate, but you don't want synthetic folate. You want methylfolate. How does your body deliver methylfolate to your cells? And we need it. Our body uses methylfolate thousands of times, a minute in all of our cells. So if you don't make enough of that methylfolate, it causes you to lean towards addiction. It causes you to lean toward depression. It causes you to move into autoimmunity, but it's not just one thing. It's all of it. So if I had to pick for methylation, I'd probably go with a neuroimmune stabilizer cream. It's a red cream because B vitamins are red. I put it on every morning. and I put it on about 5 p.m. at night. Why do you do it twice a day? The body, B vitamins hang out and deteriorate after 11 to 12 hours. It's called their half-life. And that dopamine, which helps us balance everything and supplies our body with that balancing, and it does so many things. Methylfolate, methylation feeds into that. So if you want to have dopamine around all the time, you got to get the second dose of methylation in. And everybody goes, well, I forget it. I'm like, I know. That's what cell phones are for, with an alarm, because I can't remember either. And then if I find myself kind of going, oh, I was feeling a little overwhelmed. And then I go, have I been missing my afternoon, early evening methylation or Mood Plus? It's like that.
Yeah.
And then, so that's 4 things. That's 4. And vitamin D3 with K2. So those are 5 things. But listen, you want to do it low and slow, and you want to, if it's been a long time and you're confused, do a little half-hour check-in with Catherine or Zach. Zach Williams is one of our great new male nurse practitioners, and he is loving genetics and rocking it. And he's going to start doing some of those reviews so we can whittle through our backlog of people who've done genetics.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. So that's it.
Thank you so much. I really think it's important for the order and people to understand, because I think methylation, when people hear that word, they're like, I've never heard that in my life. They kind of freak out. It's a really big word, and really breaking it down. So I have a question. When you're talking about the B, you said, was it B9?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Where would I be getting B9?
Well, we can get it from our food, dark leafy greens, but let's face it, how many people eat dark leafy greens? Not enough. Enough. And if you need to eat real food. So you can also, if you're getting quality meat, but dark leafy greens, B9 comes from that. That's a great place to get it. But the thing is, it's the right order of things. And it's interesting. I was talking with a mother yesterday who joined our group coaching cohort, and her little girl has been severely constipated for it's 8 years now. She was adopted at 4 years of age from an orphanage in Bulgaria. And she also has some other neurodevelopmental challenges, but she'd been going to allopathic doctors for this chronic constipation. And they took gluten out of the diet. And then they already were gluten-free, but then they took dairy out of the diet. And then they added PEA. And they have been to the ER and had x-rays. And she's been on Miralax and Gatorade. And mom said yesterday, she said, we've been doing this for 8 years. And who would have thought dietary modifications and PEA alone could have made her have a poopy? The bottom line is she's pooping every day now. She goes, and I'm like, oh my gosh, can we record you? And we did. So I'm so excited about that. But
so great.
The power of lowering inflammation. Lauren, one other thought, and this is what Catherine talks about too in her, what do you do when your house is burning? Well, you put the fire out. I asked a kid one time, and they said, I'd run out. And I said, yeah, you run out of the house and then you do the fire hose. But then once that's done, you go in and you clean out the house. That's autophagy and detoxification. And then you want to rebuild. That's methylation. You're adding fuel back into the home to make it run. So, yeah. All right.
I love that. I think what's super interesting, Sorry, we're getting more questions submitted in. I feel like we're touching on something that's really important. So if I hear you correctly, is yes, we can have all these amazing nutrients in our food, which we should, right? We should definitely do that. But if our our SNPs are broken, does that also mean we're not getting enough out of our food?
Right. So bottom line is this. If you've had precision genetics done and it shows, for example, that you have profound issues getting B12, then even if you're eating nutrient dense organic dark leafy greens or good quality organic meat, your body doesn't have enough little receptors to grab the B12 from the food.
B12 or
So,
B12, B9.
well, B9 is methylation, B12 is an example. So,
Perfect. Okay, so
okay,
you need all of the Bs.
yeah, you need all the Bs. So you need all of these things, but everything works like a symphony. So if you don't have enough of these little receptors, and that's what the genetics tell us, then that tells us, okay, we need to give you X amount at this time of day. And there's lab markers too that can kind of give you an idea, but the genetics are the best place to start. You start giving yourself what you need low and slow, see how you feel, and your body starts cleaning house. You may not feel a big difference initially, but then as you add things in, it's like over time, none of us, we always want to get to the bottom line, but we have to do things within our current ability and readiness, low and slow, stabilize, and then move to the next portion. And that's the way we've designed things here too. We don't want to overwhelm you. So
absolutely. Okay, so this is really important because you touched on when you were talking about inflammation. I think so frequently, and we talk about this a lot within inflammation, is that people think, oh, inflammation is pain. But you mentioned just a little earlier that this also can deal with like mental health things that can
yes.
deal with inflammation. Can you talk on that?
Yeah, in about 2014, by brain imaging, they showed that um, well, multiple things, depression, anxiety, panic attacks, they light up the brain. It's inflammation, increased metabolic rate. And then your body poops out, and then maybe you don't have enough. So when we think about inflammation, we think something hot, red, swollen, or painful. But what about a toddler? How does a toddler tell you, Mommy, my head hurts, my tummy hurts, I don't feel good? They cry, they have temper tantrums. We get anxious because we know we can't just break down and cry all the time. But you might be if you're severely depressed. But also people, if they're in touch with their emotions, it's okay to cry. But to be emotionally with it, to know where you're at. But mental illness, mental inflammation is depression. It is anxiety. It is this angst. It's this obsessive compulsive thinking. It's this all or none thinking, like with eating. That's inflammation and it comes out of the basal ganglia. So when people think, oh, if I could just lose the weight, I would be better.
Mhm.
Well, why do you have that all or none thinking?
Mhm.
And that's a part of the brain, your brain's inflamed, and it's this wishful thinking, and it's like,
Right.
put that aside and go, let's put the fire out. So yeah.
That makes sense. I think so many times, like, we don't understand, right? We don't know what we don't know. And so we don't know that these thought processes or the stress or the anxiety that we're feeling is hitting, well, everybody feels this, right? And so I think we've almost come in partnership with things that like in partnership with sickness and ailment. So how do we know when it's time to seek a professional, to seek help, to kind of go through this
Yeah.
process?
Well, that's an extremely important question, and many people minimize it and they don't say anything. And it really shows now too, even with mental health practitioners, you can ask someone if they feel like hurting themselves or if they want to die, if they have a plan, like suicide, but people will lie and you cannot rely on that. They may actually feel calm now that they have a plan and do that. But if a person is willing, and there's so much vulnerability with admitting, I struggle with depression and I struggle with anxiety, or why do I feel this way? Why can't I turn my brain off? And that is rampant. And so, I would just say that if you've been gaslit by the allopathic community, like, did you really feel that way? Then that practitioner is not for you. But I would just come forward and say, I'm not feeling good in my mind and my body. I keep having the same thoughts over and over again. And it may not even be suicidal thoughts, but it may just be very negative, self-deprecating, like, I'm dumb, I'm stupid, I'm just so dumb. Why did I think of that? And those tapes that play in your mind, those are not right. And it may come from your family, and those may be coping mechanisms, but you can change that. You can change that trajectory. So I think that if you're having repetitious thoughts, negative thoughts, I'll never, all or none thinking, I'll never get that. There's no hope. Well, that's not going to work. When you're dismissive, I would just say, humble yourself and ask for help. And everyone who comes through our doors, we hope that we deliver love and kindness, because that's one of the reasons why I made Hope for Healing, why it was just my dream and my desire, because so many people, myself included, were minimized. And I was a doctor and I went in, and then I had another physician say to me, is that really how you feel? And you know what they want to give you is they want to give you Ambien to sleep, Prozac to help your depression, but there's no answer there. So there's a place and a time for medications, and we have plenty of people on things, but get to why that is happening. And that's the beauty of precision genetics. It is here, it is now, and it is the future. And so cry out for help, ask for help, and don't just suck it up and stuff it. And we have to take it seriously. So
I think thank you just so much for being able to be vulnerable in this. And I do look forward to having our conversation next month that really dives into what that was for you and what that feels like, because I know so many people experience that, right? So many people have experienced that. And I think there's just three things I really want to touch on that you said that I think is really important to like reiterate, which is one is when it's repetitive, when it is a constant thing. I think for me, one of the first stages looked like me just telling someone, hey, this thought is always in my head. And someone going, well, that's not truth. And then going, okay, I do need to go talk to someone. I need to have that. And I think it was verbalizing it. Another thing that you said though, is that I think because you have spoken to someone in the past and they've minimized it. So you've seen a professional, right? We've talked to doctors. I can't tell you how many doctors I talked to. And worse is that they said, yeah, this is probably like stress and anxiety. Now go fix that. And then they don't give you anything to fix that. And so you're like, cool. I wouldn't be here if I knew how to take care of that. And so I think that those two things alone is to understand this repetitive nature. And also that there is genuine, like you just shared with your personal story, in part is that vulnerability is hard and scary. And so I love that y'all are already saying that it's super amazing that she's being authentic and vulnerable, and that they're just being encouraged by that, your passion. But we oftentimes don't know how to ask those questions and have that group, which is why I think also we enabled group coaching in the community platform, because we feel so isolated in that. So thank you so much for touching on that. I think it's super important because we don't always know when do I need to tough it out? When do I need to just keep going, and versus when do I need to ask for help? And
Lauren,
so
I appreciate that. And the thing is too, is that, so many of us put masks on, And it is, you stop progressing, and you've got to go through that wall of emotional barriers to become who you're meant to be. And it's okay to cry. And, I don't mind humbling myself because it's part of who I am and my story. But I just want to encourage folks to just, sit down with your kids and, just let them know how much you love them, and just ask them, and whisper to them. You don't have to, I've just made, we all grieve what we haven't done and what we've done wrong, but you begin again, you begin afresh and anew. So yes, I think, and if you humble yourself with a medical practitioner, you don't get what you need, then you're not with the right medical practitioner or the right therapist. And you need people that hear you, that listen to you, that resonate back with you, and that you can carry on a dialogue and that you feel safe with. That they're not gonna mock you or they're minimize you. Okay.
No,
All right,
I
let's
think that's
move
really
along.
brilliant. Yeah, all right.
Okay.
No, I think it's brilliant. I think it's really important also to know that Hope for Healing partners, we partner with therapists. We are not saying we are the end all be all. We believe counseling is incredibly important and an important part of your process, but we also look at things from a holistic perspective. We value all of the many things and understanding how to put them in the right time as to not overwhelm you, right? The last thing you want when you're feeling anxious or depressed is to be overwhelmed. Okay, so a question we have here is, oh goodness, there's so many amazing ones. Okay, so Pans Pandas has been coming up a lot lately. And so one of the questions, so there's like a series of Pans Pandas questions. So I'm going to ask them one at a time as they kind of blend together, which is, how is blood work or lab testing correlated to Pans Pandas?
Okay, great question. At this time, PANS Pandas, which is pediatric acute onset neuropsychiatric syndrome, where you have a little one and then they become severely obsessive compulsive, picky eating, restricted eating, obsessive compulsive behavior, disrupted sleep, dilated pupils, tics, rage, and there's just no reason why, or they had an infection. So currently, it is a clinical diagnosis. You have to meet diagnostic criteria. And the website that has those diagnostic criteria on it are aspire.care. Aspire.care. I'm here to tell you, though, that there are lab tests that help us with this. So when we think about PANS Pandas, it's usually triggered by an infection, and it's also triggered by an immune system that doesn't work correctly. So the lab work shows there's circulating autoantibodies to the brain. Okay. Now, certain viruses live in certain portions of the brain and can make physical findings show up. That's called functional neurology, and chiropractors do that. But also, there's regular blood work that shows elevated cytokines, like something called TGF beta 1 and MMP9. So we've talked about mold illness, chronic inflammatory response syndrome, which 21 to 24% of the population has this. It's not just mold, it's bacteria, it's bioillness, toxins made by living organisms. So that is actually a precursor to developing PANS Pandas, but that's in a study that's in peer review right now that is going to rock the world of PANS Pandas. So the blood work typically just confirms what we thought. So, okay, next question.
Okay, that makes sense. So, what happens when we get all of those results back?
All right, when those results back, and why do we want the results? It's a way to show what is being affected. So for example, something that we do here is called the Neural Zoomer Plus. And what we tend to see is, let's say you've got a little first grade boy that is running around the room. He's disruptive. He's talking all the time. He hates to be alone at night. He's fearful. And he has this repetitive fear. mommy and daddy, I don't want to be out of the room with you. Well, what if, and also that little guy, you look at him and he looks at you like a deer in the headlights, and you tell him, go up to your bedroom, get your socks and bring him back downstairs. And 20 minutes goes by and you're like, Johnny. And he forgot where he went, and he truly forgot why he went up there. So the lab results show, for example, anti-dopamine receptor DR1, anti-dopamine receptor DR2, anti-lysoganglioside. Each of those different circulating autoantibodies correlates with how the child is showing up. I'm treating kids that have hallucinations, and their stuff shows up on those tests.
Wow.
And so much of the time, you know, parents like, oh my gosh, I'm not crazy. I'm like, no, you knew you were right. So that's the blood work typically guides us. And let's say that was negative, then we're going to look for infections. Okay. So we might look at vector-borne illness, which is Lyme disease, Bartonella, Babesia, anaplasmosis, toxoplasmosis. So mycoplasma, chlamydia, those are infections too, and different viruses. So, okay.
Okay, so one of the questions is like alongside, okay, I have all of this, I know this knowledge, we can now attack this knowledge, but does ozone therapy help with PANS pandas, or can it help with PANS pandas?
Oh my gosh, yes. I'm telling you, if the cause is an infection, all right, then ozone therapy will eradicate it. It will also give more oxygen delivery to the mitochondria in the brain and the body so that this kiddo can focus and concentrate and emotionally self-regulate. So what ozone does is it, when you put it in your bloodstream or in your ears or up your nose or up your booty tootie or on your skin, the ozonides, which are stable molecules, kill bacteria, kill viruses, kill organisms, parasites, yeast, fungus, and that will help to start healing that child's body. Okay.
Wow.
And so, yeah, but we always stack something to cool the immune system down after the ozone, because it kills those bugs. They go and they spread their toxins all over. Then we want to put in our chronic infection drip with some vitamin C and things in there. We're very safe. This is very well documented, and that will cool the immune system, and that person will be able to recover faster. So if you think about all the years and the copays and going back and forth and the drugs and the ER visits and all of that, it's better to just hit it and hit it hard and eradicate it. Yeah.
So this question was submitted, and I think, as always, and we put all the disclaimers whenever we release it, is that this is not medical advice. This is just us having a conversation. So specifically with this question, I feel like it is definitely multifaceted. And so I appreciate the person who submitted it understanding the multifacetedness of the question, which is, okay, if the kid is known for mold toxicity and is now in a clean home environment, but the school mold environment is either unknown because they can't release the information or they're unwilling to release the information, how should a parent respond? And these are some of the options at this person. At this point, should they build the immune resilience of a child? Should they put the child on a binder always? Should they just remove them from the school altogether? So I know, again, super multifaceted and such an individual case by case scenario, but overall.
Yeah, that's a question I get almost every day I'm in clinic. Okay. If I'm seeing kids that day. So I would say this, a binder is imperative. You know, many people don't have the option of pulling their kids out of school. If you do, or if you can like stealthily take a Ermi or a Hertz me and check along the walls of the school. You could do that as you're walking down the hallway. Nobody has to know what the heck you're doing. But I would put that child on a binder, and cholestyramine administered by the school nurse, even at microscopic dosages twice a day, before lunch, but an hour after breakfast at school, and an hour after lunch, with some water, and they brush their teeth, and you can keep the orange juice at school because you can mix it up. I would do that. And then remember, it's not just mold. It's also actinomycetes, which is a bacteria. And we're finding that that's just as bad as mold. And many of us carry it with us. So if you haven't been tested for actino, so I would have the child on a binder. And if you could find the newest elementary school in the school district, we've written letters for children because of that. And I'll just say too, if the school is green schools are not good because they use recycled things that have more of a propensity to have water damage and mold and mildew. So the newer the dwelling, the newer the school, the better. And you can always put an air oasis unit in the room. I've never had a school in 8 years refuse to put an air purifier in the classroom, because in that classroom, 21 to 24% of the teachers and the students have chronic inflammatory response. So, okay.
No, that's amazing. Because I feel like that is such a hard question, right? It's super loaded. It has a lot of emotional factors, mental factors within there. So thank you for answering that for us.
You have to weigh on how the child is doing. If you, let's say all summer long, they're not at school and they're doing great, and then you put them back in school and you're noticing behaviors and thoughts, then that is a problem. So, then you're like, okay, it's just not worth it because I'll never get my kid into remission. I'll never get my kid into remission. So, but there's workarounds. So you never know. Sometimes it's one wing of a school, or one wing has the water damage and the other wings don't. So you never know.
That's amazing. Someone asked, can an air doctor be put on a school instead of Air Oasis?
Yes, the reason why I like Air Oasis better than the Air Doctor is it's got the trifecta. It's got the HEPA filter, it's got the ionization, and it has the UV light. So that's why I prefer the Air Oasis to the Air Doctor, but the Air Doctor should be able to go in too. And if y'all don't have this little book, in the back of it, it's got a letter that you can write and give it to the school. And like I said, I've never had, it's got letter templates in the back of it that you can use just for that for school.
That's amazing. Okay, so the question is how to best deal with anxiety when you're in the middle of interacting with others or at work. So anxiety strikes, you're now either in the middle of a situation or you're at work and you just don't know how to cope. What would you say?
Okay, well, first of all, you recognize that you're having the anxiety. If it's appropriate for you to give yourself a time out and get out of the room, go into the bathroom, do whatever, then I would sit yourself down and I would do 4-7-8 breathing. You've got your feet on the floor, back supported, breathe in for 4, hold it for 7, then breathe out for 8, count of 8 through like a straw, like you use your belly, and you do that about 5 or 6 times, and that moves you from fight, flight, freeze, or fear into rest and digest. The other thing is that if you're in those instances, and if they're occurring over and over again, something that we are learning much more about is psychobiotics, probiotics that help move you out of this neurotransmitter anxiety thing into more normal. There's a neurotransmitter pathway called the kynureninic and quinolinic pathway, which is anxiety. A lot of people have had this post-COVID. We've had this, and it's rampant. So Microbiome Labs has these new probiotics that are psychobiotics that have been very well studied. We're going to be onboarding a couple of these. We haven't yet, but one of them is called Zen Cope. The other is Zen Sleep. And I think there's one called Zen Dual. And I'm really excited about that because I'm wired to have anxiety too. And, you know, things are stressful and you just have to move forward. The other is if you have done precision genetics and you know you've got GAD1, if you're not on ProGAD enhancer or amantadine, you need to get together with your practitioner and get yourself optimized on that and optimize your magnesium. The other thing is, if this is recurring very often at work, I highly recommend getting Relax Max by Zymogen. We carry that, throw it into your water in the morning and just drink it all day long in your water. And it's got myo-inositol, it's got magnesium L-threonate that shouldn't make you too sleepy. It shouldn't make you sleepy, it should just calm you down. And then that'll help you. But, you know, you got to decide what your triggers are. Is it a person, what they're putting out, but you got to breathe. And if you can't escape, just get yourself grounded and optimize your genetic support for anxiety. Okay.
One of the things you just mentioned is something that gets brought up a lot, which is I keep hearing magnesium, 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 but is there really a difference between magnesium? Are there different kinds of magnesium? How do I know which magnesium is right for me?
Okay, absolutely fantastic question. So magnesium L-threonate crosses the blood-brain barrier. If you struggle with anxiety, you need magnesium L-threonate. So that Relax Max for daytime use, and then OptiMag Neuro is for more after work use and before bed. That crosses the blood-brain barrier. If you're trying to poop, you use magnesium citrate. If you can use magnesium glycinate and go way high up on it to try to calm you, okay? But when you're dealing with pain, I like to use what's called, it's a chelated group of several different types of magnesium, magnesium malate, magnesium bisglycinate, and we have that in what's called triple mag plus. In fact, sometimes if we have somebody come in for an IV and they're hypertensive, we give them some triple mag. You can actually go up to its bowel tolerance. You know, if you start getting diarrhea, you're taking too much, you know.
Right.
But mag L-threonate typically doesn't do that, and you have to take a whole bunch of magnesium glycinate to do that. But we're almost all magnesium depleted, and magnesium is a great anxiety thing. So if you know you're going to go back into work and you're going to have that Relax Max, we've got a couple of samples, you know, if you want to try the flavors. There's unflavored too. It's just, it's a good tool, especially if you know you're getting triggered at work.
Absolutely. Okay, so this is a question that says, how do I assess the quality of services provided by my OT, speech therapist, and ABA? Currently, they seem happy, but doesn't seem to be making any measurable progress.
Very interesting. I'll just say this, you know, the intuition that whoever submitted that, if your child's not making any progress, then the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting different results. So if the progress is not being made, then I think that a relook at everything. And if this was someone that hasn't done precision genetics yet, I would say, many times I'll say, don't pay for all these therapies before you have started doing precision genetics, or take a little bit of a break. if you're not seeing good results, like you're going to speech, but you're stuck, your kiddo's stuck, or you're going to OT and they're stuck, all the therapy in the world, you might be wasting your money if your child is not moving forward. So, and if you're already an established patient with us, well, then come on back in and we got to look at everything. We got to look at your precision genetics. We got to look at the gut. We got to look at your home environment. We got to look at heavy metals. We've got to just look at the whole picture and see what's going on. Because if you're stuck, then we got to figure out why. So trust your intuition as a mama that's like, something's not right. And I tell folks, why don't you just take 3 months off, and let's put the fire out. Let's do this. My brand new patients, I do that. And then start investing after that. Because if you put the fire out and your kiddo's not and anxious and upset, and they're settled and they're self-regulated and they're happy, they're going to start remembering, and their immune system and their neurologic system isn't trying to put the fire out, and they're going to be able to make new pathways in their brain and learn those things. Okay.
That's amazing. So it's all about layering everything in the right timing in order to ensure that you are getting the optimal results, right? We don't want you to just throw your money away or to feel like you're wasting your money. These things are healthy, but we want to fuel those things and give those things the energy they need to actually happen and work and be most effective. That's brilliant.
That's right.
Okay. So question. Oh, this is such a hard question. I'm trying to look at the time. Do all homes in Houston have mold? Does someone know how does someone know when to get testing after the ERMI and HERTZ test? Is there a rule of thumb of when is it time for the mold inspector? What do I do? And am I just subject to Houston being moldy?
Yeah. Okay. Everybody says, well, mold's everywhere. Yes, that's true. Okay. But when we go outside, the wind blows. So if we've got mold within a wall cavity or whatever, I will tell you that no, not all homes in Houston have mold. But yes, we do live in a humid climate. And there are things that you can do. You can put in a whole home dehumidifier. There's special ultraviolet lights and things that you can put in, and you can put in like a MERV 13 filter and change that frequently. And we have some people that you can kind of coordinate with, but I'm people who don't know about chronic inflammatory response, this mold illness, you need to find someone who does when they comment on that. So if a home is greater than 7 to 12 years old, there's a very high likelihood that you have water intrusions, because let's just face it, microscopic drips and problems. So it's recommended that every 2 years, a homeowner does an ERMI or a HERTZ-Me-Too. Money doesn't grow on trees, but the integrity of the place that you live is very important. And having those things we talked about, ionization, ultraviolet light, and a HEPA filter are important. HEPA filters alone are not going to help you if you've got biotoxin illness. So don't get discouraged. You're not alone. And as far as like the timing and everything, it depends the level of your ERMI, and then you've got to coordinate with your medical provider to determine, okay, what's going on. I can't tell you how many people that we got a bad value back and we started looking. One family had no weep holes on one side of their house. I mean, how did the inspector miss that when they bought the house? Right. I'm telling you, the inspector was not living in integrity and inspecting the house,
Yeah.
So it's very important. And so, you're not alone. It's frustrating, but that's a lot of places, but there is hope and you can get well.
Absolutely. Okay. So there are definitely things before we just pack up. There are definitely things that we can do to improve our home environment before just throwing in the towel, feeling like we're a victim to this forever.
That's right. Now you have to decide, and that's where Like if your ERMI and your HERTZ-me-2 and or your actino is exceedingly high and your home is older, it might just be better to list it and go ahead and get out. Because if you do have chronic inflammatory response, you need a place that you can heal. All right.
That makes sense. Okay. Oh goodness. I want to add IV therapies to my care plan. Is this something that I can do to come back on supplements when I'm adding IVs, or is this in addition to?
That's a great question. And it's case by case dependent. And it depends what your genetic findings are. I'll just say if you have fat soluble vitamin deficiencies, you're going to have to do that orally, like vitamin E, vitamin A, vitamins K, and D. K, E, A, and D are fat soluble. Now, if you do want to do IV therapy and you want to come in and get a Myers, for example, there's certain combinations. I would talk to your provider because it's based on your labs, like how deficient are you, or are things looking pretty good? And, we would want to work with you to minimize and try to find things that give you the biggest bang for your buck, to honor your finances. But what I do love, I just had my IV therapy in ozone this morning, is that that it really does give me an edge and more resiliency, to be able to function. So that's a conversation to have with your provider. Typically, we don't want you to stop your supplements if it's genetic support, but if it's your Bs, you could potentially not have as much, So that's an individual conversation.
Absolutely. Case by case scenario, for sure, especially because the different ways you take them and everything is so different. Okay, I think we have enough time for this question. One of the questions that was submitted was, what are your thoughts regarding medical marijuana?
Oh, okay. So the implications for medical marijuana are uncontrollable seizures, severe pain, like bone cancer pain, those kind of things. I think that with the current industry, we know that THC does kill testicular, it kills sperm and it kills brain cells. All right. But there is a place for it. But the way that I look at that is, what are you getting from medical marijuana? You don't want to walk around stoned all the time and la, 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 and your brain just going away. Okay. Now, if someone is literally on their deathbed and they need pain control, I'm okay with that, and a lot of people self-medicate with marijuana. They're smoking pot. And we have so many patients that come in and like, I smoke pot every night. It calms me. And I'm like, well, let's do this. Let's give you pure cannabidiols that you're not going to develop a sensitivity to, and you're not going to lose brain cells. And it can help with mental, emotional pain and physical pain, but it's the right kind, the right amount, with the right terpenes and all this other stuff. So I like to reserve that as, a last resort. And I'm not on the Texas medical marijuana dispenser person. I'm just like, I don't want people to lose brain cells, but there's a time and a place, and I'm not going to judge. Okay. So yeah, those are my thoughts.
Okay, so because we have a little bit more, can you talk about what the difference is between the CBD that we do suggest for people to versus what would be medical marijuana?
Yeah. So a lot of people, medical marijuana is marijuana containing hemp, the hemp plant containing THC, and that causes the calming and the mind altering type thing. But what we use is pure cannabidiols. Now, what's the difference between full spectrum CBD and a pure cannabidiol? Well, it depends what you're trying to accomplish with it. And full spectrum means they take the hemp plant, I'm a hand talker, and they take the plant and they squish it, and you've got like 80 different constituents, 80 different little parts of the hemp plant. And the problem with full spectrum is that you might develop an allergy to that plant, to parts of the plant. So in order for that not to occur, I would use pure cannabidiols, which is the powerful modulator of CB2 receptors in our body that lowers cytokines. And then we add in things called terpenes, which are derivatives of certain essential oils that help with seizures and severe pain, something called beta caryophyllene, and then something called myrcene, which helps with sleep, something called cannabigerols, which is something else that's derived from the hemp plant that helps you be happier. And, I just remembered that there is a product for the lady or the man. I don't know who entered the question that said, I get anxious at work. Something that you may want to use and get your hands on, and you can use small quantities and just see what happens. It's called Medline CBD CBG, cannabidiols, and then cannabigerols. You take it at night, and it helps GABA stay in the synapses longer in your brain. It's very calming. And if you know you've got a meeting coming up, I would try it when you're not super duper stressed, but just see if a little bit will help, like 0.25, quarter of a dropper full. And if it does, then that's something that, okay, I'm going into this meeting that usually stresses me out just a little bit and, see if it helps. So, okay. So that's kind of what we use here. And then when we identify this runaway inflammation in children, we have pure cannabidiol cream that we put on. But, some people don't process cannabidiols very well. So it just depends how the patient responds, because everybody's different.
Absolutely. I think that's really interesting because it's important and it's being used and being talked about. And so for people to have a deeper education on the pros and cons, and to know that not everybody responds the same way. And so, which is why we have so many different, if you have high inflammation markers, we have so many different ways to be able to get that down, and why I believe precision genetics is such a piece of that, right?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay,
nice
so
summary, Lauren.
Okay, so one of the things that because we are running it short on time, one of the things I wanted to touch on is that we are starting a Getting to the Root series, where we are going to be starting off with talking about anxiety and depression. And Dr. K did such a beautiful kind of really overview on different things that we're going to dive a little bit deeper. We're going to talk about it from a medical perspective, but then we're going to talk about it from precision genetics perspective, as well as what partnering with a health coach. So basically the way that we look at things from different ways. And so that is going to be May 26th, which is a Friday, and it's going to be at noon. And so if you are a part of Mighty Networks or our membership program, you will have access to that really easily. But if you do not know, or you're just joining us because you joined us, you saw that we were having something on Instagram, and so you joined us, and we are so glad that you are here. But to access that, if you wouldn't mind sending us an email at hope@get2theroot.com, where we can get you signed up for a newsletter. And so you can get all of the amazing events to hear more about Dr. K's story. We're going to be doing anti-inflammatory breakfast and so much more to come this summer and in the fall. Thank you so much for your time, Dr. K. I really appreciate all the wisdom and wealth that you so generously give each and every one of us.
Well, you're welcome, Lauren. It's always fun. And as far as that depression anxiety panel, it's going to be with, is that next Friday?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's going to be with several different practitioners across the scope. And like Lauren said, a medical practitioner, a health coach, and from the genetics overview. And because there's so many parts of that. And remember that mental health issues are rooted in inflammation and methylation. And addiction is rooted in inflammation and methylation. So I'm thrilled to have you guys with us. We appreciate you. And if you love Hope for Healing, give us a good Google review. We would love it. We need it. And we appreciate you so much. And there's no greater honor than having friends refer friends and families, because we are seeing beautiful stories of restoration and healing. And it's such a joy to be part of it. So thank you all.